They want us to pay minimum taxes. They want us to employ people, and they want us to employ people at unrealistic wages, but they do exactly the opposite. For example, there are so many contradictions. We've got a government that really and truly ran out of ideas.
Why is economic growth in South Africa so low? I posed this question to Dawie Roodt, a well-known economic commentator and a director of the Efficient Group, in a recent episode of my podcast, Solutions with David Ansara. What follows is a short extract from this longer conversation. If you'd like to watch the full discussion with Dawie, that's linked in the description below. Enjoy. Could we start off with an assessment of South Africa's economy today and why it is failing to achieve meaningfully high levels of economic growth?
Well, as an economist, I can give you a long list of reasons why the economy is not growing. Labor legislation, lack of electricity, lack of investments, and so on and so on and so on. The list simply goes on. But, I don't think that's the real answer. The real answer is we have to find out and see if we can understand why all these things are happening. Why don't we have enough electricity? Why don't we have enough investment in the country? Why do we have high levels of unemployment and things like that? And I think the answer to that is the ANC government. And I think the ANC and ANC government and everything that goes with that is the reason for all of this. It is because of cadre deployment. It is because of all the other silly policies or lack of policies quite often that we have things like, for example, total very low levels of confidence in the South African economy, low levels of confidence in government, uncertainty as far as policy is concerned. Because of cadre deployment, we don't have enough electricity. Because of the tripartite alliance and the influence of COSATU in the tripartite alliance, we've got labor legislation that's making it extremely difficult to employ people. And the list goes on and the list goes on. So I don't think really we've got economic issues in South Africa. It's easy to get to pinpoint all the economic problems that we have and to get solutions. The problem is not, that's not the issue. The issue, I believe, is political. So if you ask me what went wrong, I think my answer is the ANC government happened to South Africa. That's what went wrong.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
Okay, and there's a long list of harmful policies. The EWC debate is raging in Parliament at the moment. We have discussions around putting NHI onto the table, national health insurance, which would crowd out private health insurance providers. There's also increasingly kind of hostile protectionist policies that are putting up a lot of trade barriers around South Africa. But these all have their roots in a kind of an ideological worldview that is basically pretty hostile to business and investment, Dawie.
Very much so. We've got they like to use the word developmental state. The ANC wants to create a so-called developmental state in South Africa. A developmental state is just a double speak for what we call socialist or state interventionist kind of policies. You mentioned a few. And because of all these developmental stuff happening in South Africa, the fiscus in South Africa, the fiscal finances have become completely and totally unsustainable. So the state debt levels are at record high levels, for instance, which keep on going up at an alarming rate. And yet, despite that, they still want to implement things like, for example, the NHI or a super kind of fund, or expand the various grants, or implement the basic income grants and things like that. I don't know where the money is going to come from, but because of all these developmental stuff and this idea of a developmental state, we've reached a point where we simply cannot go on, that the fiscal accounts have become unsustainable. And now they're trying to get more money in. They're trying to increase taxes because they want to spend even more on this so-called developmental issues, like the ones that I've mentioned and the ones that you've mentioned. Now, so yes, there's a significant ideological drive behind that. And on top of all of that, we've got cadre deployment and this whole ANC and the tripartite patronage that is essentially feeding off the state. So although they use all these ideological words and things, we have to remember it's not only ideology, but it's simply the nature of the ANC and the tripartite alliance, which position themselves in such a way that they pretty much live off the state today, and they call it a developmental state, something that's caused immense damage to the South African economy in the last couple of years, and it will continue to do so in future.
Yeah, Dawie, and this idea of the developmental state is imported from places like Korea or Singapore. But South Africa simply doesn't have the civil service that many of these countries had, the same culture of accountability as well. And so I think one of the temptations that many development theorists that they have is they see models that may have worked in other countries, but which are completely different to the context and the political makeup of a country like our own.
Without a doubt, yes. But we've got an additional problem in South Africa because of all these wrong policies. And because of the wrong policies, especially the past 2 years, we've seen a huge increase in unemployment and poverty in South Africa. And that means that even more people are dependent on the state today. And according to my calculations, approximately 30 million people receive an income from the state every month. There's simply not enough money to keep on paying that 30 million an income every month, and it's inevitable that the income will come under pressure over the next couple of months and years because the economy simply cannot afford this anymore. So that's an excellent example where the state wants to be developmental or supportive and create a social security net, and even that social security net is unsustainable. So trying to do even more is just simply impossible. We've reached a point now where I can't afford even what we have, and there's no way that we introduce other things like, for example, a basic income grant or health insurance or whatever list of other things that they have in mind to implement as well.
And Dawie, you mentioned earlier the tripartite alliance. Obviously, one of the key pillars of that alliance is organized labor in the form of COSATU. And the biggest reflection or manifestation of COSATU's influence on policy is in the labor regulatory framework. So we have a number of laws like the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Labor Relations Act, the National Minimum Wage Act, all of which constrain the labor market and make it increasingly difficult for employers to take a risk on new employees. And the result is that many millions of people are without work. What role do you think the tripartite alliance plays in creating some of these bad policies?
Yeah, and there are many contradictions as well. Yeah, the tripartite alliance consisting of the ANC, COSATU, and the South African Communist Party. And each one of these members have a specific role to play. The ANC is the big brother, the senior partner. COSATU is supposed to be represent organized labor, and they were instrumental in introducing many of these legislations and laws that is making it extremely difficult to employ people in South Africa. And the South African Communist Party, of course, are the ideologues supposed to be. They provide the ideological base for the tripartite alliance. But I mentioned there are many contradictions here, and there are. For instance, currently we've got an extra grant of 350 Rand per month, which is far less than what that person would have earned if he earned the minimum wage, for example. So the state itself is paying somebody far less than the minimum wage according to legislation, and the state doesn't want the private sector to pay that minimum wage. So it doesn't make logical sense. Why on earth don't you allow the private sector to take off some of your expenditure from your income statement or your spending side of your budget? That's one example thereof. There are so many other examples as well. I mean, the ANC itself can't pay its own employees at the moment. And that actually we should be talking about taxes as well, because basically the ANC is taking the lead when it comes to a tax boycott, because according to newspaper reports, they owe something like 900 billion Rand to SARS. And there's another contradiction. SARS is talking about tightening the tax net and trying to introduce all sorts of measures to get tax evaders into the tax net. But at the same time, the ruling party is evading taxes. Those are the kind of contradictions that we see. We see it in labor, we see it in taxes, we see it everywhere. The ANC is preaching to everybody, or the tripartite alliance, they are preaching to everybody. But when it comes to actually leading by example, then they're far behind. They do not take the lead. They want us to pay minimum taxes. They want us to employ people, and they want us to employ people at unrealistic wages, but they do exactly the opposite. For example, there are so many contradictions. We've got a government that really and truly ran out of ideas.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this discussion, you might want to check out the full conversation with Dawie Roodt. That's linked over here. And I'd also be hugely grateful if you could subscribe to my other channel. That's linked over here. My name is David Ansara. Until next time, take care.